Hello and welcome, I'm Tafarag Damu. As we celebrate International Women's Day, it is time to reflect on how African women are making a difference as leaders. My guest today, Bineta Diop, is the African Union's Special Envoy for Women, Peace and Security. A very warm welcome, Madam Bineta Diop.
Thank you for having me in this show, Farah. I'm very glad to be with you.
It's been a little over 4 years since you assumed your position, appointed by the then chairperson of the African Union, Madam Dlamini Zuma, as her special envoy for women, peace and security in Africa. Probably one of the most...
I think it's... you are right. It's more than 4 years now, almost 5 years, because after Madam Zuma, I continued this special envoy with the new chairperson, after the Madam Dlamini Zuma, who is Musa Faki Muhammad. So my work continues. So, yes, 4 years of women, peace and security agenda, which is an important agenda in the context of the African Union, because as you know, the African Union have decided in the Agenda 2063 to silence the gun in the continent. But silencing the gun means that the women should be part and parcel of this transformation. Yeah, so that's the agenda that I'm implementing within the African Union.
Yeah, but I just want to understand what your role as an institution, which is this the position as special envoy within the African context. You know, the AU has several departments which basically look from different directions into what you are doing. Yes. As a special envoy, so what makes your role any different from those?
I always say that.
Are you the watchdog?
Yeah, I think it's one way is also the way of being the watchdog somewhere, but not myself as a special envoy, but being the voice of the voiceless, being the voice of the women. African Union being a member state organization, which is great, but a lot of commitment on gender issues, gender equality, women's human rights. But we always see that the distance between, the member states and the people, the public. And by looking into women, peace and security, the AU say that most of the time the women are victims. But where are their voice? So my role is to bring their agenda within the overall mainstream, as you have mentioned. It can be on the prevention side. It can be for them to participate in the mediation side, is also to look into the protection side. So that is the issues that I brought to the chairperson in the overall mainstream. In a nutshell, is the agenda of women. As I already mentioned, that women have a lot of experiences to bring at the table, either when it comes to peace negotiation, when it comes also to issues that are developmental agenda. So let's their voice and their agenda at the table. So my role is to mobilize them, facilitate their participation into the overall African Union mechanism.
How do you do that? Have you developed?
So it's a very good. It's a
because I always see women's issue mainstreamed in different sections.
First of all, I think you need to mobilize women. I call them. This is the army without guns. When you wanted to transform a conflict zone, you have to bring quite a number of women. That's why what happened in Liberia. In the transformation of Liberia, there is a big group of women who came up for. So you need, for me, is to organize the women, is for their agenda, bringing them. There are many networks that we have been able to put in place.
That's what I want to know.
So that's one of the things, because, women are not a homogeneous group. We tend to say, women, you are the same. It's not. We belong to different family, communities, religious group or ethnic group. So it means that we have a lot of difference. But what brings us is the experience that we face every day. When we look into the agenda of education, who are the ones that are really taking care of the children in the community on the education of the girls and boys? It's the women that are put at the front. When it comes to simple issue of family, water, sanitation, take it. The men are not there. They said we are fixing it. They don't fix it. The women are the one who knows the problems. So what we are saying is bring them around a common agenda. So what we do in the transformation is to discuss what are our priority areas. And once we get those areas, women agree. We always disagree at the beginning because we are different, but at the end we agree. And men agree from the beginning, but we disagree at the end. That's where they bring the fight. But women disagree honestly around the table, but at the end, when they agree on something, you will see they are the one to implement that one. That's why it's important to bring them around the table.
So what makes your work any different from what others are doing, even within the African Union framework? Because as I see it, it's not any different.
I think it's a very different way because you could see the impact. The first one is when I go into mission in the field. When I went in Somalia, and visit our military. Find Ethiopian women military in Somalia who defend our cause. They are there. I mean, Africa have fixed. If it was not the military we sent, I think we will not get the stability we have seen right now. But when you go there, the advocacy work that you do is to listen to the women on the issue that affect them. It's not just about the numbers, but the women can tell you there, this is my problem. I'm using the same facility than the men. Maybe the men are not listening to them, but being their advocate, you can now come and mediate for them. You can negotiate with the same structure and say, why don't you separate the facility of women and men? You come also to look into what kind of skills are given to our military boys. I just take that one as military. Do we give them a code of conduct so when they go, they're protecting the civilians, but not abusing the civilian, in particular the women? So you need to make sure that the AU have adopted this instrument, are actually implementing it. So I'm facilitating. My role is to advocate and make sure that whatever we preach is what we are doing on the ground, and make sure that the women also perceive it. So I said, mobilize the women, help them to understand, but make sure that they have access either to the AU. We have a great network in the African Union, and I'm sure that like GMAC, the Gender Campaign Network, this is the network that called for gender parity in the African Union. That we have now 5 women commissioner, 5 men in the transformation of OEU to AU. So this is one thing that civil society, when they form their coalition, they are able to say, hey, we want this. And some of the time, the structure listen and the leader listen.
So basically your job is, as an institution, something related to advocacy, I would say primarily
is to advocate for implementation, because we have a lot of policy, as I rightly said.
Plenty of them.
Plenty of them. But now the how. I say we know the issue. We have the instrument, but the issue is how do we implement? And that's where now we come in. The last thing we did in my office was, and I should applaud the Peace and Security Council, because within the office of the chair, we put in place the Continental Result Framework. We want to measure, because if you want people to believe on you, show them data. So we say that peace and security, we need to measure. How many female or men are we deploying to the field? Are women part of the mediation tool mechanism? That's why the African Union have created a mechanism which is called FemWise. And those women that are wise enough, trained enough, have skills, can be at the table. At the track one, the highest level, so they have the skills, they have the knowledge, but they can also be at the track 3 even, at the community level. we need to reconcile also at various levels. So this group of women that are mediators are very important for the African Union, and it was one of our plead.
That's very interesting at the village level, at the community level, at the grassroots level, which you basically have been doing for many years before you came into the picture as the special envoy. What actually is happening at the grassroots level, at the community level, and how are you involved in mainstreaming that? Because that's, I think, very...
So when I meet with the women on the ground, they said, oh, we are glad that the African Union have come into it because it's very distant. They sometimes they don't realize that they are the one who create the African Union because it represents the member state, but they don't see the proximity with the African Union. So for us, it's really to bring the voice there, to say that there is this policy that have been adopted by your leadership and it need to be implemented. That's why we are helping the women themselves at the community level, even to understand the program of women, peace and security, whereby we say that this is the commitment in the National Action Plan. As I said, when we started my work, was that 16 or 17 countries had National Action Plan to address this agenda, but not implemented. So for me now, we have 24 countries that have adopted National Action Plan. So one of my role is to make sure that the leadership and ownership are taken by those who are at the grassroots level, by questioning the highest level. What are you implementing on the ground? Are you supporting the quick impact project and on environment issues? We visited recently the Lake Chad Basin, where we see that the water is shrinking, the lake is shrinking, it's diminishing. So it has huge impact, desertification. And you see the linkages with the spread of the terrorists there, because the environment degradation has an impact on the population. So when we went there, I visited with the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. We went into the Sahel. We went into the Lake Chad, and we sit down with the women. And you see them, it was traditional, the men were the fishers, but now the women are fishing with a small boat, catching small fish. And we say, what do you need for us, the UN, the AU, to bring to you? They said, we need boats. We said, but it's not too difficult to help you on that, to be in the market, to have access, the government to give us this, etc. So we went to the government and said, listen, this is what we found on the ground. You can, when it comes to land, why don't you provide the women in the agriculture sector? 75% are the women workers. Why don't you give them access to land? The AU have a policy of providing land to the women, but yet it's not happening. So our advocacy is to go to the government and say, listen, the women are doing this. I'm sure that you know, but we can tell you the how. The how is to bring the different actors around the table, AU, UN, to help those women.
Well, so it's a two-headed kind of intervention that you have. One, you engage governments
underground,
plan. Yes, a bilateral thing. And the other one is use the AU framework.
To make sure that we evaluate what they committed to, but also to deliver. Because it's not just commitment, but evaluate what they have deliver. Because AU is not a mechanism to deliver itself, just to measure the progress of the member state. Either it's at the regional level or at the national or at the grassroots level.
How effective is your intervention at a face-to-face level with governments in different countries in the African continent?
I think it's the mere fact that even the framework that we have developed have been accepted by Peace and Security Council. I think this is great to say, we agree that you come and measure us. It's the first step. The second step is my intervention, my office intervention on the ground, is that to bring the different actors around the table. And government have been very cooperatives to make sure that we bring civil society around the table. When I go to any country's chosen country, they accepted that all actors come around the table on that agenda, that capacity that we are giving them. But also, one of the commitment I see is the plan that we help them to develop are discussed within the parliament. You know, when you own your own program, you take it to your people to be in your budget. And that is one of the, for me, the milestone that government are accepting the women's agenda to go to their parliament. It means that they own it and they take the leadership and they put the money in the implementation. So we are gaining some progress. I'm not saying that 100%, some government are in it, but we are dialoguing, we are pushing, we are putting pressure with the support of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, but all the champions on gender equality, which are sometimes head of state.
How do you pick a country for intervention? Is that
We at the African Union, I think my work is more on issues of prevention. So where I see violence, for example, I was in Senegal last week where my country were having elections. And you know, election is part of the problem because we need to prevent. Election might be violent and bring a country into war, into conflict or violent conflict. So in my country, Senegal, what they did is to facilitate the emergence of the group of women. Either they from different parties, but also from different, not just politicians, civil society mainly, the big organizations that are dealing with developmental issues, health, education, all of them together to say, let's work on what they call the 3M strategies. As I said, if women want to transform, they need to be one as a bloc. They put themselves, call themselves the women in white. They all wear the symbolic white to say we want peace. Went through all the villages, the rural places with their caravan, peace caravan, to say that elections are coming, but we women, we need to do it through the ballot and not through the bullet. Let's go and make our vote count. Let's make sure that our children, especially the boys, are not violent because they have been used. So we talk and have that messages. But also they train, the other one is to train the monitors. Journalists, they train journalists to be able to collect the data during the election and say where there are, point of violence, so the women can go and mediate. The other M is the mediation. So they go to the religious leaders because they can't. They go also to the others to say, can you come up front and support our voice that we have peaceful election? So those 3M strategy in Senegal have helped. You have seen that everybody, anytime it started 2014, but it was done again 2019 and being replicated in other places. And they have what they call the women's situation room, where everybody are sitting to collect information, but intervening immediately by using mobile phone and making election, as I said, be credible because
but that could also be disruptive in some cases.
I don't think that it can disrupt because as I said, it's not they are not discussing politics per se. It's not partisan. What is there is just like a group of mediators, but you train the young boy and young girls that you deploy to be able to collect the information, but the right information because they are in the pool. And what is good is that the Electoral Commission have found in many places that is useful as well. Not just because they're useful because they are not partisan. Useful because what they talk about is their own agenda. How many women in different political parties are there? Because we need to start there. Right. We said that to put in place the ecosystem for women contribution and participation in electoral system.
But I'd like to know about your African Women's Leadership network.
Yes.
That sounds interesting. Have you...
Yeah, I think it's...
your agenda forward?
Yeah, I think it's, as we said, we have been able to see many network on women, peace and security. IGAD have a women forum for peace and security. When we started this work many years ago, there was not many network that talk about peace and security. It was just like it's the men or it's the army or it's not our agenda. But now we have seen many network because we're supporting the women's group to have the lens of the security agenda. But we say that if we need to transform Africa, is not just concentrating on the issue of women, peace and security and stability, but also look at the governance, the structure of governance. When I look at now Ethiopia, the Prime Minister have found that in the transformative agenda that he wants to implement is implementing, the women have to be at the core. So it's a governance issues, but it's also a development issues, it's a human right issue. You take them, so women have to be leaders, but not number only, but having the quality and the quantity is important. That's why we create what we came together as African women to say, let's build our platform, which is Africa Women Leaders Network, across Africa. Now we have,
you have so many chapters.
Ethiopia is going to launch their chapters, I think very soon. It was planned for March, and we are encouraging them with UN Women to bring the support with Germany and our friends, which is the partners here, to make sure on each country we have the national chapter of Africa Women Leaders Network. But not only that.
But it's interesting. How independent is this network? Because much of the funding comes from the West.
No, I don't think that most, because we have several pillars. Let me tell you one of the work, the stream work that we are doing with the Economic Commission for Africa. It's an African, it's a UN. And what the UN has launched recently with Dr. Vera Songwe, with Musa Faki Mohammed. Both of them have decided to put in place the Africa Women Leadership Fund, which is going to fund women that are, entrepreneur. Because as we said, yes, we have women entrepreneurs, but we don't have a lot of women fund managers. And that's why when you see most of the bank, women don't have access to finance. We have good projects. Women have good projects. But the access to the funding, the access to the bank system, it's limited. So the ECA and the African Union have come with the idea of putting this fund, which is being established by the ECA, and we can see very soon the application. But it's the African money. It's the private sector money of Africa. So it's not just we looking at, Africa is rich, my dear. You know it. You know that Africa have tremendous resources. Is the accessibility that we need to look at. And that is why we say private sector come in, because we are going to make sure that the fund manager have the capacity to manage it and to identify the good project to make sure that we pay back, because women pay back. That's the reality. And we have seen Ethiopia at the forefront in the system of women banking, but we need to build it further, strengthen the system, make sure that it flourishes all over Africa. It's part of the thinking of the Africa Women Leaders Network.
Well, good luck and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.